Well, hello and welcome back to the NCMU podcast, where we are dedicated to raising up the next generation of nerd culture ministers and missionaries. My name is Mark. I'm one of the hosts here, and I am joined by somebody kind of unique and likely somebody that if you're listening to this podcast because you're connected to the Nerd Culture Ministry Summit, or perhaps you have a heart for evangelism inside of, your local board game shop, or maybe your online gaming community, or maybe through a live stream on Twitch, you probably don't know this guy. However, I've been working with some of the tools and stuff that Doug has made for years now as the lead pastor of Lux. It's language that is very common in our church. And if you're listening from our church, you'll immediately recognize it because it's just words that come out of our mouth all the time. And it's the words that Doug and his organization use. So, Doug, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Mark, thanks for having me, man. Pumped up to do this.
Yeah, pumped to have you on. I got to be on your podcast not too long ago. Uniquely enough, it was because despite the fact that we come down on different sides of the digital church, we actually think very similarly about digital church. And so we just had really, similar thoughts and similar spirits when it comes to what the church is doing online right now. And Doug, you work with an organization and started an organization that really helps churches in many ways become relevant either for the first time or again to people who are far from Jesus. So can you tell us a little bit about Intentional Churches and a little bit about your story and what you guys do?
Yeah, Mark. It was great having you on the podcast and giving our listeners a chance to hear kind of a very different perspective than most of our churches would hear about how you guys are approaching church and thinking in digital spaces. So, I see Intentional Churches has been around now. We've been doing this work. I want to say we started in like 2010. And the brand of Intentional Churches started in 2013. And if there's one thing that's marked us from the very beginning, it is IC is a gigantic experimental learning community about ministry. And so we iterate. We've been told recently by one of our internal staff, he's a really great digital marketing guy and helps us a ton. He's worked in some pretty fast-paced digital environments doing marketing and said, IC is a lot like a digital company, a software company, because we iterate at such speed. And so one of our challenges has been over the years, if you intersected with IC at any point in history and you kind of put us in a box, we don't ever remain in that box for very long. And so this latest iteration of us, we're saying it this way, man. What we help church leaders do and church influencers to think about is how do we get everyone in our churches to own the Great Commission personally and in the way that Jesus exemplifies in the New Testament. And hopefully we get into this a little bit because it's been incredibly eye-opening to me to reread the New Testament through the lens of an implementation guide for the Great Commission. And
unpack that for me a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Well, I don't know how it is. Maybe you can shed light on it for me in digital spaces and where people are influencing people for Jesus. But in, churches that are in person, there's a tremendous amount of underlying consumeristic thinking in individual Christians that we as church leaders actually have created by the way in which we've designed our churches. And so if I go back to my statement, if you go look at Jesus' last words in Matthew 28 about the Great Commission, and then you go back through the Gospels and read how did he implement the Great Commission with his disciples, you'll see, for instance, like when Peter was called, it was immediately, his command was, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. And they went. There was no preparation. The calling of Matthew.
No class. Yeah.
No class, no Bible study. Okay, fishermen maybe didn't even know, the Old Testament, the Torah, because of their work. And here in Luke 5, when he's calling these guys and the story of the full nets, here is a carpenter. A carpenter is telling expert fishermen to fish differently before he says, I'm going to make you fishers of men. So, they've already come in, they've had empty nets. And he says, go back out to the deep. I'm going to take you deep. Think about that for our people. If we are going to challenge the people we influence, we're going to take you to the deep, and I'm going to show you to fish a different way than you're used to fishing as an expert. And then the nets are pulled up, so much so they had to call another boat, and the nets are breaking. There's literal chaos in the boats. That, again, if you're reading this through the lens of personal ownership of the Great Commission, he's exemplifying for us in these stories about what church should be like. It actually should be chaotic. You're bringing disruption to people. And so this idea of personal ownership of the Great Commission is relinking the idea of discipleship and evangelism into a symbiotic relationship of transformation for the individual believer in Jesus, and also the way, shocker, by which his message gets spread to the rest of the world. Is this making sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. So what I think I'm hearing you say, Doug, is, in the church world that we have today, we have had a lot of this mentality over the last, I don't know, however many years, right? Evangelism's hard. Sharing your faith with others is hard. There's a education gap is the primary problem. So we're going to offer classes to fill the education gap. That didn't really do it. And so the result has been we'll pour 80, 90% financial time, staffing resources into a product that is easily accessible on Sunday mornings. Your job is to invite your friend to church who doesn't know Jesus. Our job is to make that a really great experience, and then we will share the gospel with them for you, right? Bring your friend to church. And so, by and large, your primary responsibility and then we'll make that easier for you. We'll give you social links to be able to share online. We'll give you invite cards to be able to hand to coworkers, at your job. And so we want to strip away any sort of real risk or any depth in the process of evangelism. But what that does is it also strips out the process of discipleship, because it's inside of, being Christ in other people's lives that we really become challenged and hungry to grow to become like Christ. I always told people who would come into our youth ministry, if you're having a hard time reading your Bible, the best thing that you could do is volunteer as a 6th grade small group leader.
Amen.
Because you will get asked questions that will make you want to know your Bible instead of trying to force yourself to read your Bible when you have no real reason to read it.
Exactly right. This is exactly right, man. And so I believe that ministries that you influence have this same temptation to be designing their ministries digitally in such a way that they are reinforcing this institutional thinking. And instead of a church service as the institutional thinking, it becomes that end product that they may be developing as a content creator is reinforcing institutional thinking inadvertently. Mm-hmm. And again, if we go do an autopsy over COVID of what happened in the American church, it showed in spades what a programmatic church, what a behavioral strategy church, like attend one, serve one, group one, give one, and putting them all on equal ground with evangelism. Even putting evangelism underneath those, we're going to put being in a small group or coming to a worship service ahead of relational evangelism. No, the way to break institutional thinking for any of your listeners is you have to put personal ownership of the Great Commission above all those things, those other behaviors. Because again, the programmatic church, I'm going to choose my church based on the programs that's offered. Think about an inherently consumeristic of a strategy that is. Yeah. It's about me becoming an individual consuming the church resources. Think about the behaviors. Oh, if I check off, attend one, give one, serve one, get in a group, I've done enough.
I am a disciple, right?
To what end?
We want trackable,
right.
Things that we can look at on a church dashboard. So if we can get people to open their Bible app, read the verse of the day, show up for, raise a prayer concern on Sunday morning with the card, we can check the boxes and we can say, as a church, we are quote unquote successfully discipling people, which what we might be doing is just maybe we're making good roadmaps. Perhaps we're we've built a really good system, but maybe not actually making disciples because people aren't taking the Great Commission onto themselves as being part of the kingdom of God.
This is spot on, because my question is, to what end? The programmatic is consumerism. And even I would argue this idea of the behavioral, attend one group, all these is still consumeristic. Have I done enough to check the boxes? The only thing that makes sense, if you really get down to brass tacks, is that I am generous financially so that others may know him, and not through the institution or the advertising of the church, but through the believers of the church who are taking that message, because it is, like you said, very shaping. Think about how much you have to die to self, lose yourself so that lost people, or ones as we call them, in your relational networks and influence could know him. You got to take all kinds of risks. You got to pray differently. Like you said, you got to read your Bible differently. You're getting asked, you're in spiritual conversations about big time. Last thing I'd add, Mark, because I think as my generation, the generation before me continue to age, I would say for younger church leaders, this programmatic and behavioral church strategies we've gone down. Think about in COVID, those generations primarily were backfilled with a why through politics. I'm going to be political is the parent motivator, so the institution of the church can prevail in some weird way, when that was never God's design or intention in the New Testament. It was always the people of God going together in mission, dynamically reaching lost people that they know, and God weaving a dynamic web across these relational networks. And now digitally it can go, I don't even know how exponential the influence can be.
Yeah.
But, my challenge is, how in a digital space, do you have your head around this? How in a digital space do the believers go, and we don't just become a giant AI-driven advertisement for Jesus?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think there's tons of areas that we can dig into there, and I think one of the things that's really important, and this is going to be an ideology conversation as much as anything, like why are the things that you're doing, what are the things that you're doing? But I think there's an inherent temptation. I think in the church world, there is this natural draw and pull with a few checks and balances that says, like, the church isn't just me. It is supposed to be a group of people. Even if you end up structuring the church just kind of around the leader in the end of the day, like, there is a pull towards the fact that, like, we're building something that's pretty big and we're going to need lots of people to do it. And I think in the creation world, right, as we're looking at live streamers who are doing this missionally, as we're looking at, maybe someone who's creating a YouTube channel, they want to introduce people to Jesus in creative ways, and I know there's a lot of people like that who are listening to this. This is if church by its nature is communal, creation, content creation, and influence is by its nature very isolating, and so there is this almost you're almost abnormal in this space if you have a team of people that are helping you, who are volunteering, who are behind you. And so there are so many people that are either flying solo or very, very close to solo with a pretty significant amount of influence over people's spiritual lives, with a lot of people looking to them. And what we are beginning to now then generate is a tremendous number of spectators rather than people who are, deeply engaged. They're watching and spectating somebody else evangelize, watching, spectating someone else live in community, watching, spectating somebody else live out their faith. And not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. It's just that there is a lack of, on the backside, impact for people's lives to be genuinely transformed, instead of it just being people sort of watching and spectating. You mentioned the one already. One of the things that I have loved about Intentional Church is how you guys take this toolbox of tools, and to be honest with you, like I don't know that we've ever gotten past, I feel like we've been working with 3 tools for 5 years and are yet to master them. Like these are sort of like the quintessential, easy to pick up, difficult to master type of things. Like these are the things that can drive everything that you do, that you have to go back to over and over again, reassess, rerun. And then it's like, okay, we got work for the next 48 months. I kind of have an idea about where we're supposed to go, which is one of the things that I've loved about Intentional Church. Is you describe it as like a church operating system, right? Your iPhone has an operating system, your computer has an operating system. Take me through a little bit of these pieces, because I think so many of them are wildly applicable to the average creator, the average person who's, they're trying to bring people to Jesus inside of their Dungeons and Dragons game group at their local board game shop, right? Like, I think this is really applicable to a lot more people than just churches.
Yeah. So the conversation we were just finishing up, I want to be really clear. What our latest iteration is around this concept of radical alignment to personal ownership of the Great Commission. And we have all kinds of resourcing to support that. But the foundation before you get into the toolbox you reference is really an ecclesiological, a little theological and missiological scriptural base for how to approach church influence, and so on and so forth. So
okay, let's break down those 3 words, right? Because not everybody like you come from the church world. Pastors, you're going to be, maybe you'll be familiar with ecclesiology, theology, and missiology. Most people aren't. And so when we're talking about ecclesiology, this is the practice of the church, right? This is how the church is the church. We're talking about theology. This is the study of the nature and the character of God. And then missiology, this is about practice, right? This isn't just about like how the church is formed and what it's supposed to be about and what its ideologies are, or how its services are run. Missiology is like, how do we put rubber to road and practically live out our faith?
Spot on, man. Well defined. And you'll have to remind me when I use words that are churchy words. But our learning over, listen, we passed through working with 1,000 churches a year or so ago. We're over 1,200 now are engaged in some way with IC across 30 denominations and networks. You can't not touch those kind of churches and be learning at a high rate of speed what's going on. And so this is where we discovered these things you're talking about, the application of church, what as a believer you're supposed to be doing when you follow Jesus, what the study of all these things are deeply, deeply broken in the church, and they're actually not scriptural in the way we run most of our churches. So I can't emphasize enough how much this new season of IC under aligning itself under the banner of radical alignment by every person you influence who knows Jesus to personally own the Great Commission. Now, once you set that and conviction starts to set in leaders, and that's where I would challenge any of your listeners, you got to start there. Once that's set, then we have what we call our one team toolbox, which is what you're familiar with. We use the terminology one, so everybody's tracking from my definition, from Luke 15, when Jesus tells a parable about, hey, if you were a shepherd and one of your sheep left or got lost, what would you do? You'd go find them and rescue them. And so we use one a lot in our naming conventions. And so one team is, how do you keep a team, which some of your listeners are in isolation. I would really challenge that. Like, you got to not be in isolation. God intended us to be together. And so then the toolbox allows you as a group or a team to fight for how you align your strategies and structure so that you are honoring and building toward a biblical model of what church is supposed to be and what believers are supposed to be doing. And so in that toolbox, then we have an approach, Mark, I think you know about, it's like any system or process. We always start in what we call discovery, like asking your listeners can ask this, where are we at actually and how did we get here? And that takes a lot of courage, man. And we say to get to the last 10% of truth, let's be really honest through that biblical framework I referenced about where we're at today and how we got here. From that, those tools, I think, are some of the ones you probably love. Like we use with permission the 4 helpful lists from the Patterson Center. 4 helpful lists is a great tool. SWOT analysis would be another one that's out there. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. These are discovery type tools that you and your team could use. What's been your most humbling use of that tool, Mark?
I think we've used a tremendous amount and I want to get into this idea of like, how do we find, discover, refine, and think through the context of the one? Like, I think that is going to be some of the most for our people, some of the most helpful thing for us to talk about. I think between that, then going through the flywheel and then evaluating using 4 helpful lists. And so like going through 4 helpful lists, by the way, guys, is like just sitting down and saying like, hey, you take an idea up on the board. So let's say you're just going to take your YouTube presence, for example, or maybe for us, it would be small groups. And we would say, okay, let's write everything down in 4 quadrants. One of those quadrants is, it's working, it's going well. One of them is it's not working. One of them's it's confusing. And another one, it's just wrong, right? And I think I got that right, Doug. I might be forgetting it off the top of my head. Did I get one of my quadrants wrong?
You did, but it's okay, man. So the wrong and not working are together. So what's wrong, we want to fix. It's broken. But then you add the what's missing.
What's missing? Missing, confusing, wrong, and right? Kind of like those 4 categories. Yeah, and so we'll take time and port through all of those. We go through what's missing. We want to clarify it, right? What's missing, or I'm sorry, what's confusing? We want to clarify it. What's missing? We want to add it. What's wrong? We want to fix it. What's right? We want to bolster it and double down on it. And it really helps us sort of dissect exactly what's going on inside of any of our areas. And we sort of, we cycle back to that 4 helpful lists relatively often, especially when our staff is physically together, to say, hey, let's just take an area and let's really talk. We're kind of doing that with church growth right now. We're looking at going back to the drawing board and we're saying, we don't think church growth in the digital context looks the same as it looks like in another church. We don't think it's get as many people in this live stream as we can. And what we have found is that online ministry is deeply relational when you're doing it well. And it's actually sometimes more relational than physical ministry, and it's less spectator than physical ministry. You would think it's more. It's actually the exact opposite. And so we're like, well, if we would think that church growth strategies is getting many as people in the building as we can in the same spot on Sunday morning, we would think, oh, naturally, sure, get as many people in a live stream as you can, but maybe it's the exact opposite. And what we're already experiencing is, it's probably the exact opposite. And so we're looking at church growth through this context of 4 helpful lists. But as we were developing that, one of the most powerful things, if you feel good talking about it, is talking about us. We were developing a one, like who was not just like the one person that I'm personally reaching to. We use that language all the time inside my church. I just did a leadership video with our team asking people to share, hey, who's your one? We want to pray for that one. And, people are bringing specific people up by name. I have a one, but then on top of that, our church also has a one, right? An archetype that we use to funnel all of our thoughts, all of our actions, all of our events through this archetype. Talk to me a little bit about developing that one for somebody.
Yeah, so in our process, we would move from discovery, that kind of use of the 4 helpful lists, into design. And this becomes, as you're getting us to, just an anchoring spot for ministry design. When you conceptually design with your team, again, remember, this is an alignment tool, the kind of persona of a one, who may show up to your ministry setting or your YouTube channel, and it's a literal, we go through a very narrow demographic slice, age, very targeted age. In an in-person church, we're going to talk a lot about, role. If it's a family, is it the mom, dad? And then really get into the descriptors of what their life looks like. And this traditionally has been used in church for a little while now, 20, 30 years, this kind of thinking. But the power isn't in that demographic slice. It's really the next layer below it. When you get to the core motivators, because no matter where you are in the world, you make decisions on how to spend your time, attention, and money based on your core motivators.
Yeah.
So that is the true power, aligning power of designing your ministry, your YouTube channel, or whatever, through an aligned lens as a group of the core motivator of somebody that we feel like God's laid on our heart that we should reach. And the irony is the demographic slice will fade some the more you understand and use the core motivators in your design, because you're into something. I don't know if your listeners are familiar with value propositions. Is that something like
I'm familiar with it. Probably not something that's common inside. If it's common inside of the church world or business world or marketing world, there's a good chance it does not cross over into our world very often.
So value propositions are when a business or a content creator or anybody, a church, is approaching more as an institution. They are trying to tap into your core motivators and why you would purchase something.
Yep.
Or why you would give in the attention economy, why you would give your eyeballs to something longer, which then translates into money.
Yeah, sure. So what's the return on my investment? Like
That's right.
I'm investing time, attention, energy, watching your video, spending time in your live stream. What is the value that is being returned to me? Now, this is that's a very consumeristic way to think about things.
It is, and this is why it's so critical to have that biblical foundational base where it is you are thinking about how we are mobilizing and activating whoever we influence to become one aware and activated in their life. That is the only counterbalance. Otherwise, you will slip completely into institutional thinking and design, and you will be reinforcing consumeristic behavior in the people you're influencing. Is this making sense, Mark?
Yeah, I think it's making sense. Yeah.
You got to be very careful here. So these core motivators, this is what I harp on these days of what we've learned. These are the unlock.
Yeah. Okay, so walk me through a little bit of like, what does that look like to create an archetype? Because I think this is one of the key things that I think is very helpful. I also love this idea, which I've never thought of like this can be taken too far. Like we can reinforce consumeristic thinking like this. You know, if you come from the church world and you sort of follow the church growth movement and mega church movement at all, like you knew of Saddleback Sam, perhaps, right? Saddleback had sort of like this archetype of the individual. And they were super effective in not just knowing what clothes Sam wore, not just knowing his family situation, but of also knowing what were the things that Sam was afraid of? What are the things that motivated Sam to get out of bed in the morning? What are the things that he dreamed about? What were the things that really made Sam tick? And I think that, and I think what you're kind of getting at is a little bit of that, like not just, hey, we're trying to reach 25-year-old to 30-year-old guys who play Call of Duty. We're really you're asking about tapping more into like, as you're creating this archetype of a person, really digging into what drives them.
That's right. Including really asking yourself the question deeply, why do they play Call of Duty so much? Mm-hmm. The amount of time they play and why are they playing Call of Duty? Mm-hmm. And getting under the underlying core motivators of why they are making the decision to do that and not something else, or play a different game even. I'll give you an example. Right now I'm preparing for my last to graduate from high school, and she was a pretty good flag football quarterback. She holds a couple of high school records, and if you're not into sports, I'm sorry in advance. But here, I will betray my age. So we're doing an open house in a couple of weeks, and I asked her, could I put together a highlight reel of her kind of. She threw 54 touchdowns this year. It's a lot of touchdown passes.
Yeah.
And she said yes. And so here I am. I have never done video editing. I know I'm going to shock a lot of your listeners, aren't I? Never done video editing. So last night, I'm literally on AI platform researching for a beginner and I am making a choice to use, what's it called? Cut something. Do you know this video?
I don't know. Listen, I'm a video editing amateur. I'm a DaVinci Resolve guy. That's
okay, that was one of the platforms. But maybe this will identify with some of your listeners. I am making the decision on choosing which through my motivators. I want to honor my daughter. I want to highlight her. I want to show off her prowess as a quarterback. I'm proud of her. It's like underlying, I'm making a choice because of the motivator. Otherwise, I probably would never engage video editing at all. I'm older. I don't have any desire to do video editing. So I think when you're a ministry designer or content creator, you got to be really paying attention. If you want to advance forward, when we move into the design portion of our process, we are asking the question, where are we heading? And where are we heading as a team or a group? And this is one of the foundational pieces that will take you years to get your head completely around the lasting impacts of your one and their core motivators. It will take iterations and practice and learning of how you unlock more in a healthful way that doesn't create consumerism, the ones that you're trying to influence in your ministry or your networks.
Okay, so at Lux, one of the things that we've gone through this process, and we gathered, I think, my staff in Florida a couple of years ago, and we worked on this for hours, like multiple days. Like we were in the crucible for like 72 hours. We had like 25 hours of meetings in 3 days. Like we were really in it. And, we walked out. Our one has a screen name instead of a name. So our one is Shadow Slayer 329. 329 is their Enneagram triad. Shadow Slayer is a 27-year-old living in a studio apartment, coming home, working a dead-end job, coming home every night, not really having anything to do better than hanging out in Discord, has a small server, hangs out with his friends, hangs out with the same people every night, games together each night, games late enough that he doesn't have to think whenever he lays down. So he's always perpetually a little bit tired and exhausted because he's never getting enough sleep because he doesn't like laying in bed and thinking about where his life is going at night. And so he games until he's purely exhausted and knows he's just going to hit the pillow and completely pass out. He doesn't really have anything bigger for his life to be invested in, but he does feel like culturally he's supposed to be sort of like pro LGBTQ plus. And so he's sort of like vaguely on board with that. He left the church at about 13 years old when he thought the people there were hypocrites and hasn't really considered coming back. And I think one of the things, like when we developed Shadow Slayer and we started looking at the Enneagram numbers and we started looking at some of the peacekeeping things and some of the want to impress people that came out of that, it really began to get us into what motivates Shadow Slayer. And then what we began to ask was things like, what is he afraid of? What is he afraid of? He's afraid of insignificance. He's afraid he's going to sleep at night and he doesn't want to think because he's afraid that the job that he has and the life that he's leading right now is going to lead him to an anonymous life of insignificance. And he doesn't know how to handle that, and he doesn't know how to get out of that, and he feels trapped in it. He's afraid of being alone. He's afraid of being alone long term. He's afraid of not having any propositions with women or any opportunities for the future. Now, not everything that we do only caters to this particular individual, but everything that we do does channel through this, like at some point or another. And then we had the question, like, if Shadow Slayer came to our church tomorrow, where would we want him to be 12 months from now?
Yeah.
And what are the things that are in place that would help him get there? And what are the things that are missing if we wanted him to get there? And that became the structures by which we began thinking through everything in our context, through everything in our ministry. And so it was, this is the person. And if the person that we're structuring everything to reach and we're thinking through showed up and they were with us for a year, we wouldn't want them to be the same. We would want this gospel saturation. We want them to own the Great Commission. We'd want them to we want them to have a 1 in a year from now, right? We would want them to be more fulfilled, more driven, a higher percentage of participation in their physical life and in their journey. All of these sorts of things, more satisfied in their work. What are the things that need to be in place from our end as disciple makers and as leaders inside the church to equip the saints for work of ministry that help Shadow Slayer move from where he is today to where he would be if we wanted him to really move in 12 months. And I like those things for us, Doug, were absolute game changers when it came to prioritizing what we needed to build for our church and gutting things that didn't need to be there.
You're spot on, because now you have that aligning piece in place for your team. It's like a true north. It gives you an aligning. We don't devolve down into opinion about what the church should be and what church people should be doing when they follow Jesus. No. We're aligned around it. We may have different opinions about how to effectively reach and equip that person.
Yes.
And that's fine. That's part of, but you at least have an aligning true north that's pulling you in the same direction. So I love that you guys have gone this far. And remember, think about it, the power of the combination of the believers at Lux being equipped to have ones, and they are owning the Great Commission personally, and now the organization of Lux married up to expect that they're going to show up with what's his name again?
Shadow Slayer 329.
Shadow Slayer is that now we're married together in partnership between the organization of Lux Digital Church and the believers who exist inside of the church. This is what you're fostering and stewarding as an influencer, not one or the other. It's not just, hey, everybody own the Great Commission personally, and we're going to have a sucky church experience in the digital landscape.
Yeah.
It is that when they show up, they don't want to be around it. No, you go, and we're going to commit to a team to align around this idea of Shadow Slayer and be prepared expectantly that you are going to bring them. And when they do, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, man. It's explosive. And we gotta, this will be a unique setting. We got a surfer church, a beach church down in Florida that baptized 200 people in the ocean on Easter Sunday.
Is this Salty?
Yes. Salty.
Heck yeah. Robbie was my IC coach. Robbie's my IC coach.
Nice, man. They averaged last year 2 baptisms per day. This year they're averaging 2.5 baptisms per calendar day.
Jeez.
And they're, in Acts 2:47, and the Lord added to their number daily. They've been praying for that.
Yep.
The way they got here was the marriage of these two things: the equipping and sending of those you influence to be one, aware and activated, and the building of an organization that is expectant that those ones are going to come to Jesus and know him, and tapping into these core motivators to try to help all this along. And like I referenced back in the Luke 5 talk I gave a bit ago, and it's chaos. Do you think Salty Church is organized? Do you think it's like perfect little Christians walking around? I mean, these are like rough beach surfer. If you're not familiar with the surfer crowd, they were like skateboarders in the 90s and 2000s. They're the outsiders. They're much, I'm going to guess, like some of your listeners. They're outsiders, and they're
absolutely.
So anyway, I forgot about that you and Robbie knew each other.
Listen, Robbie and I have done a lot of dreaming together. I don't know if he'll listen to this one or not, but I've been saying for the last couple of years, Robbie, it's not enough. I love the 2.5, but I'd be telling him that, listen, the beaches in Florida aren't enough. You could be, if we could figure out how to take your one, we could be planning micro churches and baptizing people in every hot beach spot around the world. We let's double, triple, quadruple that number of daily baptisms in beach communities in every great beach place across the world. I think there's and they have somebody on their team now who's working through some of that stuff and like figuring out how do we take this very coded church that's been so direct in what they're doing and doing it so well to other places. I think one of the things, Doug, that people get nervous about when they're thinking about this is they think about, well, isn't the church supposed to be for everybody? And my stream, the content that I'm creating, it's nice to feel like I could maybe have a bullseye to aim for, but am I not being unfaithful if God sends me? What do I do with the people God sends me that aren't my one? Then are they on the out? What is that? Am I not here for them? How do you help churches unpack some of that? Because I do know that that's a genuine concern inside of this community. I've been training people on the one for the past couple of years in this community. That's been a number one concern for them is like, well, what do I do with this person who doesn't fit this mold?
Mark, without the risk of being condemning, because I don't want to come across being that way, but if you've gone down that road, you've bought a cultural falsehood. And that is that it's an individualistic viewpoint, as if your individual influence could reach everyone on the planet. It's not. You have to. Personal ownership of the Great Commission is a team sport. There is no church competition. Mm-hmm. And who knows at any one time the number of believers who could be pouring into a one inside of your influence. And some of them don't even come from Lux Church. Mm-hmm. It is a team sport. And so I would just say, without going too far into detail, like the inclusivity of the culture is actually anti what God taught in this way, that Jesus can be for everyone, and you're not the only ones that can reach them. it is a dynamic web that God has laid across the planet. If you think through it, you're stewarding a relational network of every Christ follower that's in your influence. And there could be other organizations influencing those same believers to go reach their ones. Is this tracking?
Yeah, and in our context, there almost certainly is, because the vast majority of people, maybe not at Lux, right? Lux is a little unique, maybe XP Church is a little unique, but the vast majority of people, if they're watching your stream and they are Christian, they do have another person influencing them, because they very likely have a church, right? They're connected to a church.
That's right.
They might be connected to 5 other streamers or creators that they're watching when you're not live. And so they do have a network or a web of people. You know, something that we say a lot too is like, we have a one, but we're faithful with whoever God sends us. Like, our goal is not to be unfaithful with the sheep in the fold, right? God has intentionally placed some feet, and there's some overlapping, right? There's some overlap with other sheepfolds, but he's intentionally put some sheep in the fold. My goal is not to be unfaithful with the person who doesn't fit the mold, but that doesn't mean that I have to be apologetic about the mold existing to begin with.
That's correct.
Doug,
because,
okay.
I was just going to say, it is imperative that we put this to rest. There is, because at the core, your whatever network of people you influence, there is a DNA footprint of core motivators and relational influence in that group. And at the end of the day, we don't want you to get hung up on the demographic slice you may get to, or the description like you gave about Shadow Slayer. We want you to really fight for below that and take this piece off the table. Like, this is not about exclusion at all. It's actually way more inclusive to go this route. It's countercultural. It's what Jesus did.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, Doug, like, we didn't get into the gospel flywheel. We didn't get into really any of the other tools. You have a lot of stuff out there that if someone's like, man, I really want to learn how to not just reach people, but to equip the people inside of my context to carry the Great Commission in their lives, not just watch me carry it. Where are some good places that people can dig into some of the resources, books, writings, and stuff that IC has out there that might find stuff applicable to their own ministry area?
Thank you, Mark, for asking. So I would encourage them all to go to our website, intentionalchurches.com. And the very first thing I would have them check out is the Alignment Workshop online. And this is a kind of a 4-week study in a cohort online that really begins to build this biblical foundation in your team, in your group, and in you personally. And that is the best starting point we have. And like you said, there are literally tons and tons of resources we have now, but this is the best starting point, the Alignment Workshop online.
Yeah, and you guys just released a new book too, right? Like just.
Yeah, actually 2. One is in process of being released. We released last fall, the Radical Alignment, The Surprising Journey to Becoming an Intentional Church, which is built to be a team study. It's got team study questions at the end of each chapter. Again, all focused on building this biblical foundation before you get into the strategic side of our tool kit. And then the second book is called One More, and it is a 30-day kind of devotional guide to light up one awareness and activity in the individual Christ follower. It's not an organizational book. It's really a study of Scripture and how Jesus went about implementing the Great Commission and how you can do that. And we're hearing incredible stories. I just heard one yesterday of a lady who had read it as a proofreader, who was a believer, that said, I'm not doing this and my church isn't doing this. And she just baptized 2 of her friends in a lake. It's crazy stuff, man.
Let's go. I mean, imagine doing this, if you're listening in, imagine doing this with your stream. Imagine doing this with your Discord community. Imagine taking your community through this with you to help them see their part in the Great Commission, not just as a spectator of you telling people about Jesus, but of actually owning that and taking that on themselves to be agents of the Great Commission. Well, Doug, I know that we need to land the plane and get out of here. I just want to thank you so much. I know we wanted to have you at Nerd Culture Ministry Summit. You're going to be doing a workshop. We weren't able to have you at it this last one, but hopefully in the future we're able to have you come and take some time to actually work more than 30 minutes to have people really work through what this might look like in their own context. So thank you so much for coming on the show and for hanging out with me today.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Awesome.
Yeah, make sure you guys go check out that cohort, check out the new books that Intentional Churches are putting out. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. And thank you so much for listening to this season. I think we have one more episode in this season, a little finale where myself and Saint Bear or Zach and Bubba from Love Thy Nerd go over everything that happened in Nerd Culture Ministries Summit and some of our favorite moments. So be sure to tune in for that final episode for this season. That's going to do it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.